New words, new narrative, new understanding, collaborating with other kids, learning how to get along, learning it's not your turn right now, but it will be in just a minute. These are key concepts that we want to teach our young kids, and they're happening once we change the lens in play.
Good morning again. I know many of you got to meet Kathy as she walked in the audience, and that's terrific. And I'm delighted to introduce her. I want to just mention a few things about her background. One of them is, I mentioned that my institute is here at UIC, and we aim to bring research into practice, and Kathy Hirsh-Pasek is the perfect example of that. She's a well-decorated scholar with funding from all the top national agencies, with awards from our highest professional associations, publishing in all the top journals. But she's also taken that out into the public and policy and practice. She has a best-selling book, Einstein Never Used Flashcards. She wrote a book called A Mandate for Playful Learning in Preschool for Policymakers. She's been on shows like The View and Good Morning America. And one of the things that's really important for today is that she's also worked with children's museums. And that's important, again, for us thinking about spaces where children can learn, where families can go to help children learn beyond what we might think of traditionally. Before I turn it over to her, though, I have to remember that she chided me last year for not mentioning her most important role, which is being a mom and raising her children. And so some of you may know that A Christmas Story was here this winter, a musical version, and her son Benj was actually the co-writer of the music. So I had to mention that. So I'll turn it over to her now.
Well, hi, everybody. This room feels way cavernous, so I'll try to make it as intimate as I can, given that I'm stuck behind a podium, which is not a natural space for me, but come along with me anyway, and anyone who wants to move up, please feel free to do so. I also want to thank the University of Illinois Chicago for hosting me again. You guys are so wonderful to make the space, the Children's Museum, the Action Alliance. You guys are doing just amazing stuff in Chicago. And I know that when you live here, sometimes you don't ever get to look around and see how remarkable your city is. But honestly, your city's pretty incredible, and this place is pretty incredible. And if I may, I just want to start with the story of this morning to tell you how incredible you are, which is when I came over, I got here a little bit late because my my cab driver, was from Ghana. And it turns out that, that he was talking to his daughter in Ghana because his wife just went back for the very first time in 9 years to go see her kids. How amazing is that? And her kids are 16, and her kids now, there's 16, I think it was 15 and 13. Can you imagine that? And this guy was telling me she hadn't been back. He'd been back every 6 months because he's driving a cab in Chicago, and he said to me, "You have no idea how great Chicago is." That's what he told me. He said, "This place made me feel like I was totally at home from the time I got here." And he said, from the time I brought my wife over here, we knew that we had a place that we fit in. He came to us as a teacher. He taught in Ghana. And I said to him, "My gosh, you need to be with kids. You need to be teaching people in Chicago about what it's like in Africa and how amazing your journey has been." And he said, "Yeah, that's what I want to do again. I want to be with kids." That's the greatest natural resource. And I can't applaud you guys more, because every single day, you're the ones who take the greatest natural resource that this country has to give, and you put it together and you help make them shine. And so, big hug. Thank you. So today what I want to do is I want to talk to you about playful learning. And I want to have a conversation with you. I'm going to throw out some stuff just so you can say when parents say to you, seriously? You want my kids to play? I want to give you some reasons that you do want to say yes. And that the wonderful people in the back, there's a great woman in the back here who taught forever in Chicago public schools, right? Everybody take a peek here. Oh, University of Chicago preschool, okay. And when things started to go south and you weren't allowed to play anymore and play became a dirty word, she and many other amazing human beings said it's not good for kids. And they're here today to support us in bringing it back. And this isn't going to happen from folks up here speaking down. It's going to happen by watching kids, by being with kids, and from all of you. If we form the mission, if we make it happen, if we get people to understand that what you all do every single day is more important than what any banker is doing, and what anybody is doing when they're in a law office, then we're going to start to win in this country. You're the most important resource we have. So let's turn it around, guys. You ready? Can we do it? Oh, man, you sound resigned. All right, let me see if I can. I'm going to sound like I can do it like you. You ready? Yeah. Okay. All right, I need to see empowered people here because this is totally not going to work if you're not empowered. And I will tell you that the kids, you ready? Let me really hear it. All right. Now we are talking. Okay, so I want to talk to you about play-based learning, and I'm going to do it in a very evidence-based way. So play with me here for just a second. Ready? Ah, now we're talking. Okay. The question is, what did you hear? Yeah, thank you. What's a rhythm? You're not going to believe this. Mathematics. Okay? A rhythm is math. You can't do rhythms unless you can carve up time, right? You do 4 beats, right, in measure. That's you're carving up that measure into 4. You got it, guys? All right? Now, everybody will say, oh, you're just clapping. But you weren't just clapping. What I hear when I change the lens on clapping is I see people doing remarkable stuff, like mathematics. I see people doing remarkable stuff, like waiting to hear what they heard and then imitating it, which shows executive function, attention, control, and planning. Whoa, what's going on here? Oh, it's just a little kid acting like King Arthur, right? Wrong. What is it? Playing. Just playing? Don't ever want to hear just playing. Navigating a world. What kind of a world? Imagination world. A narrative. Oh, did I say narrative? Oh my God. That's the precursor to reading. Right? Have you all heard about that? Because when you can tell a story, that's the basis for literacy. It's the basis for reading. Boom! They're planning. Who's going to be King Arthur at the night table? What are they going to do with the sword? This is like incredible, guys. Can you feel it now? So when I change the lens, I see language, I see social skills, I see perspective taking, I see planning, I see attention, I see memory. I watched a group of kids yesterday in what you got to go see. It's the newest exhibit at your children's museum. I watched these kids in the circus. Nobody told them to take off their shoes. And every one of them, Nadine and I looked around and said, every one of them took off their shoes and they were part of the circus. One of the kids was on the stilts. One of the kids was trying to walk, the high wire. Another kids, what was the name of, what did they do with that narrative? They put these masks on and they called themselves the Great Whatever She Was. And then they would change and the next one became the Great Whatever She Was. They were making a story before our eyes. They were learning new vocabulary. These kids didn't come in here knowing stilt. They didn't come in here knowing high wire. And yet, they'll never forget the experience they had at the opening yesterday at the Children's Museum. New words, new narrative, new understanding, collaborating with other kids, learning how to get along, learning it's not your turn right now, but it will be in just a minute. These are key concepts that we want to teach our young kids. and they're happening once we change the lens in play. So don't ever let a parent come into you guys again and say, are they, what's that word I hate? Just playing? Say, oh yeah, you mean the physicist over there? You mean the psychologist over there? The sociologist over there? Yes, that's what they're doing. They're having a liberal arts education right now. And they're doing it in our child care. That's what's going on. All right. Listen, preschool education is on the national agenda. And it got here because of Chicago. Thank you. And in early education, we know it's a needed investment, produces long-term returns that justify increasing investments, even in hard economic times. And you know where we learned that? Professor Heckman, who teaches at? Thank you. There's something about Chicago. There's a theme here. I just want you to appreciate your talent before you leave, okay? All right. Further, there's Common Core curriculum now. It was announced in June 2010 for the K-12. There is talk about moving some of this into 0 to 5. We've got to be cautious here. Very cautious that this doesn't get misinterpreted, because that's an easy thing to do. Sometimes what are meant as creative benchmarks become thresholds for the new test. I am banking on you guys to not let that happen. You ready? All right. Stand up the force and say, this is a great idea. I love benchmarks. By the way, the kids will get to those benchmarks by playing King Arthur and being in the circus exhibit. We're going to help them, okay? But don't make those thresholds. It's not fair to your kids. Now, that means that all of us have a job to do here. And it means that we have to get it right, because we don't have a choice. Our job is too important. Somebody makes a wrong banking investment, okay, fine, we'll deal with it. You can't make a wrong investment in young kids. And I'm going to a little bit shock you with what I think the right investment is going to be. I'm going to put this in the terms of that banker. I'm going to help you see why that banker ought to begin to see why you're important and the most important job in the society today. It's because we're leaving an information age. Factoids simply aren't enough anymore. We're entering what's called the information age. And they tell us that information is doubling every 2.5 years. Now, I get that I'm old, guys. But just to let you know how old I am, we did not have internet when I was in college. Okay? Now, are any of you, like, older than, let's say, 6? Then you didn't have tweets when you were a kid. You didn't have smartphones when you were a kid. Right about that? Any of you remember having YouTube when you were a kid? Right? All that has happened as you were growing up. Things are happening super fast. And if people believe that all we need to do at this point is somehow dump facts into the heads of kids, they are wrong. It ain't going to work, because information's changing too fast. And if it's changing every 2.5 years, even if you had that crazy idea that the way we're supposed to teach kids is that they are empty vessels, and you just pull off the top of their head and you pour stuff in, even if you poured everything in that you could today, in 2.5 years, you'd be at 50%. In 5 years, you'd be at 25%. 10 years, they'd be stupid. Okay? All right. Point is, it's not what we need to be doing. We need to teach them how to be innovative. We need to teach them how to integrate the information that they have. So I want to pose today a new idea for you. This idea is what I call the 6 C's. And the 6 C's, you probably can't even read them from back there, right? So I'll tell you what they are. They're sort of the hard skills and softer skills. Hard skills, it's something we can really teach. Softer skills, we're not sure how to do it, but we will, okay? And here they are. Turns out it's a developmental model. It builds directly from the scientific literature. And it happens to be, for the first time in our history, the very same thing that the CEOs of Chicago are worrying about today. Think about it. For the first time, what's good for kids is good for America. Collaboration is number 1. Kids need to know how to get along. You know that, right? Not new to you. If they're clobbering each other, we're in trouble. And if they clobber each other like they do down in the Congress, we're in trouble. Got it? Okay? We need to know how to collaborate. We need to know how to get along with differences. Community comes with collaboration. Diversity comes with collaboration. Second, communication. We need to know how to speak with one another, not just at. We need to understand that our world is not just to be blogged. It's meant to be interactive. Right? So our children in our charge need to speak back and forth, and that means that they can't just speak, they also need to listen. Something we're pathetically bad at. And by the way, something that our parents aren't so good at either. We're so good at filling the space that we're not really great anymore at allowing others to have their voice. Now, content is important, but content is only one of the 6 C's, not all of the C's. You with me? And is content just reading and math? No. Do you think we could add art? Cool. Dance? Music? Could we add maybe social studies? History? Anybody for any of this stuff? Yeah? All right. Let's get off. I'm not saying we have to ignore reading and math. Very important. But it's not all there is. But of course, even if you mastered all that, in today's world with information doubling every 2.5 years, what we need is critical thinking. We need to know how to navigate all the information that we have. Which blogs should we trust? Do you know how many apps there are for your phone? Which ones are good? Which ones are terrible? And who the heck knows the difference? So critical thinking. Sort of like going to the supermarket. If you buy everything that's on the shelves, bring it home, it's of no use unless you have a recipe. The recipe is like critical thinking. But of course, that won't be enough. We have a lot of smart people who know how to critically think. We need creative innovation. We need the kids who I saw yesterday at the circus exhibit. We need those kids who are willing to invent the great poobah who was standing up on the circus podium in ring number 1. That's the kid I want to work for me. I want that kid because she's going to be the next Steve Jobs. She's going to be the one who puts it together in new ways. She's going to be the one who has a spark, who doesn't just follow everything, but makes information interesting. She's the kid who is not going to come home to you and say, She's the one who's going to fill that time and make it productive time. Creative innovation's number 5. And last, we need to give them spaces. And here I speak directly to you. We need to give them spaces to be confident and try. Because our kids are afraid to try new things because today they are so afraid of failing. And their parents are so afraid that they are in unsafe places that they don't even let them climb in the gym anymore. That's incredible to me. So I was in Naperville. Now I have this image going into Naperville. I've seen Naperville. I had this image that if you're going to pick a perfect town in the world, it was probably going to be Naperville. You know, I can't even imagine that Naperville has ever seen a crime. I'm not sure if they have a police force or not. Naperville seems to be so clean that you could eat your breakfast off the ground in Naperville. Okay, so I was just shocked by this. I forget exactly what they call it, but I think it's called Saferville or Safe Naperville. They made a special mini Naperville. I couldn't make this up. So the little kids could play in Naperville. And the parents are now taking them to the mini-me instead of the maxi-me to go play in Naperville. What's wrong with this story? The statistics show that it is no less safe today than it has been throughout time. All right, maybe in tribal periods, but it's no different than it was 10 years ago for our kids. Why aren't we letting them climb and jump and gain confidence? All right, let's go through them one more time just so I'm sure you have them. So the first one is collaboration, getting along, working in teams. Second one is communication. Third one, content. Fourth one, critical thinking. Fifth one, creative innovation. And last one, the confidence to put it all together. Well, Daniel Pink, 2005, is the author of a book called A Whole New Mind, was bestseller. And he wrote a very important thing for you and your kids. He writes, the past few decades have belonged to a certain kind of person with a certain kind of mind, computer programmers who could crank code, lawyers who could craft contracts, MBAs who could crunch numbers. Are you ready? Go. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. One more time, please. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. The future belongs to a very different kind of person with a different kind of mind, creators and empathizers, pattern recognizers and meaning makers. These people, the artists, inventors, designers, storytellers, caregivers. Wait, what did I say? Did you hear that one again? Okay. Consolers, big picture thinkers, that's you, will now reap society's richest rewards. 21st Century Partnership is a group of CEOs, 500 CEOs who were interviewed about what we need for the future of the United States of America if we are going to continue to control the frontier of ideas. The answer? Ingenuity and agility, flexibility. I am told that a person graduating from school today will hold 8 to 10 jobs in his or her lifetime. 8 to 10. Okay? Most of those jobs have not yet been created. Pity the poor person who decided they were going to be a toll taker when Easy Pass came along. Pity the poor person who was a journalist when all the newspapers started to close. Pity the poor photographer who only knew how to deal with non-digital photography. Kodak just put itself out of business. It invented the camera, the digital camera, and then it didn't know what to do to adapt in a world that became all digital. Isn't that incredible? Kodak filed for bankruptcy. All right. So now you must be saying by this point, where in the heck is this lady going? Because it doesn't have anything to do with me. Well, I hope you see a little bit so far, right? We cool? And it certainly doesn't have anything to do with our children. But in fact, it does. The children who you are working with today, the 5 and unders, they're the workforce of 2040. You have them. Right now, in your charge, you have tomorrow's workforce. Can you be more important than that? You have tomorrow's bankers, you have tomorrow's lawyers, and more importantly, you have tomorrow's artists. And they are in your hands. And what I want to suggest to you is if we want to have the goals of the 6 C's, the way that we're going to do it is by playful learning. So let me show you why I say that. First of all, high-quality programs are characterized by playful environments. You've walked into those places that aren't any good. You know those really clean places where nothing's going on and it's quiet? You know those places where the toys are so high that the kids can't reach them? You know those? Okay? You know those places where you walk in and teacher says, well, we now have 5 minutes for circle time. 5 minutes is up. I don't care if you're in the middle of a sentence. You know those places? That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about places where the kids have great relationships with their caregivers. I'm talking about places where kids are engaged in active learning. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are. These same issues that we're debating at this conference this morning in this workshop, they're being debated in the United States, they're being debated in Canada, China, and in Singapore. This holds, doesn't matter for what kids you have. Doesn't matter if they live in the farms or if they live in the cities. Doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. All of them need a high-quality start. And the question that we need to be asking, what in the world happened to play? When did it become a 4-letter word? So, in 81, we know that a typical school-age child in the United States had 40% of her discretionary time for play. By 97, the time had shrunk down to 25%. I'm not even sure we're in the single digits now. All right? But let's look at the research. In the last 2 decades, David Elkind, who wrote The Hurried Child, suggested we have lost 8 hours of free play time per week. Thousands of schools in the United States, and I know this is happening in Chicago, despite the evidence, thousands of schools are dumping recess. Our kids need recess. How many of you have any boys in your charge? I will say no more. A recent survey from the Alliance for Childhood, survey was in 2009, suggested that we needed to really bring back play because it was being challenged in our society. They went and they looked at 142 New York classrooms and 112 classrooms in LA. 25% of the teachers in the Los Angeles sample said, catch this, guys. By the way, I want to remind you, it's kindergarten. 25% said they had no time in their school, in their child care. 0 time for play. None. 61% in New York reported having 30 minutes or less in their whole day for even choice time. And in LA, the number was 81%. 79% of the New York teachers reported, this one killed me, okay? I can't even say it. It makes me sick. 79% in New York, 82% in LA said they practice taking tests every day. Please think about that for a moment. It's so sad. It's just so sad. All right, so this has hit the news. All right, Scientific American, February 2009, play-deprived childhood disrupts normal social, emotional, cognitive development in humans and in animals? Really? Even rats need to play? And we're not letting humans play? New York Times, can the right kinds of play teach self-control? New York Times, February 2010, playing to learn. New York Times, January 2011, a movement to restore play is gaining momentum. You are now part of that movement. This is the movement. Christian Science Monitor just did a cover story on what's going on with play, January 2012. People are paying attention, and for the past 5 years, folks have been starting to report it. We are just above the radar screen. We're not far above the radar screen. Okay, we're inching our way, but we're getting there. Okay, but we're wearing out our kids. All this stuff is a drill and kill nightmare for our little guys. All right? I mean, this is real. Okay, so even the American Academy of Pediatrics got in it. They said, oh my God, what's going on here? And they wrote a whole set of guidelines. The importance of play in promoting healthy child development. Can you believe it? The pediatricians are now with us. Everybody is. What's the problem? Our society is confusing learning with memorization. Our society is confusing test scores with success. Here's the challenge, guys, and the challenge is really one for all of us. How do we both enrich our kids' lives and make sure that we're fostering play so that our kids learn collaboration, communication, content, critical thinking, creative innovation, and confidence? And don't tell us it can't be done, because it can be done. And if you want to see seriously a superb area that does it every single day around this country, it's the children's museums. Yeah, you don't need to even have the fancy exhibits they have. And again, I encourage you to go see the circus. Because the circus was made yesterday. That circus was made by going to thrift shops and buying jackets, by buying piecemeal stuff that the kids could dress up in the dress-up corner that doesn't exist anymore in most of the schools. Isn't it a shame that we have to put it only in a children's museum? That it's in a museum to have a dress-up corner and have blocks and have snowballs? All right, this year, maybe you need the museum for that. Okay, all right. Today I want to offer some evidence for playful learning by starting in five parts. First, to tell you that early education is important, but how you learn is as important as what you learn. I want to define playful learning because it's not an easy concept. It's not let the kids alone while you watch TV. Okay? It's not let them do whatever they want to while I oversee it. Okay? And hang in the corner sipping coffee. I know you don't do that. But I want you to truly understand what it is. I want to talk about playful learning in self-regulation, playful learning in academic outcomes, and then I want to talk about the implications of all this for you guys. All right, the evidence, how education is important, but how you learn is more important than what you learn. Preschool experience dramatically increases kids' collaboration. We know it. It increases their social skills by as much as 62%. It decreases kids' problem behaviors. It increases kids' communication skills by 25%. In content, we know that it increases reading by at least 59%, increases writing ability, and increases math scores. Okay? The positive effect that preschool attendance has on pre-reading for low-income children is comparable to or larger than, catch this, the effect that homework has on school achievement, the effect that lead poisoning has on diminished IQ scores, and the effect that asbestos exposure has on cancer occurrence. Wow. Does that convince you just for a moment that you guys are pretty important, okay? It makes a difference. But it's not just what you learn, it's how you learn that matters. And there have been a lot of comparisons in the literature now between developmentally appropriate schools and the more traditional, what we'll call direct instruction, do it the same way we've been doing it for many years approach. And that tells the story. Developmentally appropriate schools, schools that know what the kid is about, that gear their curriculum to the kid, that let the kid take the lead, have active learning, not passive learning, playful, guided learning. They take a whole child approach. So instead of saying, oh, now it's time for math, and then we're going to have reading time, they recognize that when you are planning for a birthday party, you got to write the invitations, you got to remember who you invited, you got to plan what's going to be at the party. When you cut the cake into 10 slices, you're doing fractions, right? Got it, guys? They know that. And they're not compartmentalizing. And they view a child as a discoverer and an explorer. But the direct instruction, the kids are sitting more passively. Learning is more compartmentalized. They're sitting there doing test prep in 79% of the New York schools, passively working on worksheets. Paper and pencil stuff, empty vessel metaphor. Now, the developmentally appropriate schools have a lot of advantages. In social emotional development, we know that those kids do better in emotion regulation. That goes under big duh, right? Kids are less likely to kick that kid off the swing, that's emotion regulation, okay, when they've had a chance to swing. Okay? I mean, this is so simple, your grandmother could tell you. Sorry. I don't know where we've lost it. Common sense went somewhere. I'm still looking for it. Okay. It decreases child stress, it decreases behavior problems, and it increases their motivation for school. Another one. Duh. Right? Not a surprise here. But academically, those same kids do better on the tests. Isn't that shocking? Than the ones who spent their time practicing it? Our kids do better because they really learned this stuff. The kids yesterday who learned those words stilt, that's going to be in their vocab, right? They know what a tight wire is. They're not going to learn it by just hearing you say, now today we are going to learn the word stilt. Stilts sometimes appear in circuses. Oh, yes, clowns do it. They put their feet on these wooden things, and they're taller then, and then they have to bounce. Now, are you going to remember that? Any of you remember any of the SAT words you ever learned? Okay, there you go. All right. What happens in direct instruction early childhood classrooms? We get more inattention, restlessness, and stress. Decreased confidence in our own ability, right, because we never get to try anything. Less enjoyment of the challenge. Less end-of-year progress in motor, language, and social skills compared with their age mates in developmentally appropriate practices. And in fact, we know that what you learn in these developmentally appropriate rooms, it lasts over time. Let me give you some examples. One is a very celebrated one. It took place just up the street here in Milwaukee in a low-income area. It was by Angela Lillard and Esquist, and it was published in the highest journal in our land, Science. And what they did is they compared a Montessori education to which kids were randomly assigned to a non-Montessori education or a business-as-usual kind of school. What did they find? The children in the Montessori classrooms at age 5 did better than the business-as-usual kids in academic tasks like reading and writing, in positive peer play, and they did better in tasks that required that you attend to another person's beliefs or ideas, which is going to be important for critical thinking. Catch this. By age 12, they held on to the advantages. They all went back into the business-as-usual schools at age 6. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, they're still in the same yucko schools. All together now. And I come back and I look at those kids who had the playful learning experience versus those who didn't, and I find they still like school more, they're more creative in their writing, and they're still better in reading and math. It's like you gave them an inoculation. So when you hear that famous question coming your way, but we need to prepare the kids for the hell they're going to have when they enter into school, okay? We need to make sure they're ready for the disaster when they go into jail. No, you don't. You're the inoculation. You're the best drug they can take. Because the children are actively engaged. They learn through play. Let me give you another study, also published in that famous journal, Science. It was by Adele Diamond, Steve Barnett, and a crew of other folks, and it looked at the tools of the mind, which I'll come back to in a bit. Very famous program which teaches you self-regulation. They found that playful learning through the tools of the mind helped kids learn what are called executive function skills. It's the new collective term for things like attention, memory, and planning. What do? They had games that went through the entire school day. You be the speaker, I'll give you a mouth. You be the listener, I'm giving you ears. Your job right now is just to listen. Your job is just to talk. And then we'll switch. You're going to be the one who helps us with this recipe. Let's put on a chef's hat. You're the one who reads the recipe, I'm the doer. Then we switch as we figure out the mathematics of how many cups of flour we really need. Everybody got it? Now, it turns out these skills are highly correlated with fluid intelligence, and when teachers promote these skills through playful learning throughout the day, the kids do better in a lot of skills. Let me give you one more. It's called a meta study, which means monster, okay? It really means you take a whole lot of studies and you clump them all together and you say, are there any patterns here? Anything I can learn not just by reading one study, but by looking across all of them, the landscape, like zooming out like you might in Google Maps? And here's what we found. Alfieri, 2 years ago, reviews 164 studies of young children along with studies of adults and adolescents that revealed that assisted discovery learning, view that as playful learning, okay, trumped both explicit instruction and unassisted discovery learning pedagogies. Bottom line is it works. Play and learning are not incompatible. Play is not just wasted free time. If it's used properly, it can be a deeply powerful tool to increase children's learning, math, and even science. So what do we mean by playful learning? Playful learning to me is two things. One, it contains time to have free play. Because it's in free play that children become bosses. When children have to fill up their own time, they need to learn management skills. True? When they have to find something to do on their own for a certain amount of time, they get smarter, not dumber. But it also means something else. Guided play. And guided play, in the way we're defining it right now, means two things. One is that you take the stuff in your environment and you arrange it so the kid is going to trip on just the right stuff. So the Montessori classroom is a really good example of that. It's not the only example, okay? Children's museums do this all the time. Reggio Emilia does this all the time. What you do is if you want the kids to understand what's going on with triangles, then you need to have triangles around. You have to have things that are architecturally going to show you what a triangle does so that they can discover it. And should they all be the same triangle? No, they're not going to discover anything that way. They need to discover multiple triangles and zoom in and find out, so what really makes a triangle? What's the essence here? Everybody got it? Okay. That's number one, is you populate your environment with the stuff you want your kids to learn. That, by the way, can be King Arthur. Lots of wonderful vocabulary can be learned from the knights in shining armor. Teachers can also be there. You guys can be there to see what they're interested in and to build on it. Yesterday I saw another wonderful example of that at the Children's Museum. Those people who were helping out in the circus, they could have gone in and taken over, right? They could have said to the kids, this is what we will play now. But they didn't. The kids took the lead. And then one of the girls walked up to the people who had these handkerchiefs all over their head, you know, I told you, the Grand Poobah, and said, wow, who are you? And let them, the kids, lead the way. And then she just built it so the story continued. Notice the language that went on there. "Oh, yes, I'm the queen of whatever." And she said, "Wow, what kind of a queen are you?" And then the kid goes on and has to answer that. Do you see how I'm getting turn taking? Do you see how I'm building language? Do you see how I'm building narrative? Do you see how I'm building the foundation for literacy? That's what goes on in guided play. So guided play doesn't mean that you're doing direct instruction in play clothes. Guided play means you're really letting the kid take the lead. But you have the stuff in the environment that's going to allow them to do that, and you're building on their interest to help make it even richer. All right, let's look at it. Playful learning in self-regulation, self-control, that ability to hold back, that ability to not want snack time an hour before snack time, okay? It's a tale of two Spocks. One Spock was Benjamin Spock, very famous writer, author, who told our great-grandparents how you should parent. And then there was Mr. Spock. Right? You all know Mr. Spock? Coming your way yet again. Star Trek is coming out in 3D. Anyway, Benjamin Spock got it all along. Social and emotional regulation mattered. Mr. Spock, did he ever get it? And Mr. Spock still doesn't get it. All right, emotion regulation. It's about impulse control. It's about self-guidance of your thought, thinking it through before you do it. Not all of us do that well. Sometimes I just do it. It's about planning. It's about self-reliance and getting dressed on your own. It's about socially responsible behavior, acting in a morally good way. And by the way, when you learn that, you're learning a lot. You learn to be more persistent. You learn to have task mastery. Academic achievement goes with this. Social cooperation, maturity, moral maturity. You know what's right and what's wrong. Now I'm going to give you a good one. Any of you know the marshmallow task? I love the marshmallow task, right? Let's look at the marshmallow task. We have 2 marshmallows you put in front of your kid. Your kid is 4. Now you say to the kid, well, you sit here and I will be back in 2 minutes. Now don't eat the marshmallows. Okay? And if you're cool enough and you don't eat the marshmallows, I promise you I will give you both marshmallows when I get back. But if you cannot stand it, if you are dying, if you feel too much for you, ring this bell, and I will come back right away and I will give you 1 of the marshmallows. Can you see this trade-off here? Yeah. All right. So it's definitely worth, right? You get 100% gain by waiting the 2 minutes. Well, those kids work at it. All right. Some of them are like, right? Other the kids are like, no! Okay. And other kids ring the bell. All right. So it turns out it was done by a guy named Walter Mischel. He's a famous professor at Columbia University. And, you know, we always test out these first things, just like, you know, Gloria and Robert. I always test it out in my studies with my kids. And so he tested it out with this kid. And he said, you know, I'm really curious. What happened to all those kids who flunked the marshmallow test? And he started talking. They said, oh, they did not go to schools that were anywhere near as good as the kids who passed the marshmallow test. They did a formal study. Catch this. Catch this. Those who waited scored over 200 points better in their SATs years later. Isn't that amazing? All right. But the exciting thing for us is that the kids who flunked the marshmallow test can be taught to have better social emotional control in those tasks where I told you about the mouth and the ear, this tools of the mind kind of task. All right. This stuff doesn't develop on its own. Everybody says, oh, worry about the academics. The social and emotional will take care of itself. That is not true. Kids don't just learn to share. Kids don't just learn to be polite. They don't just learn what's right and wrong in the world, and they certainly don't just learn to say please and thank you. Right? We got to help them. All right, let's look at playful learning and academic outcomes. You're doing it all the time. Tell stories. Every one of us has a story to tell. We're really good at outsourcing. We think, oh, I'm not a professional storyteller. I guess I have to take my kids to the library. That's not true. You all have stories to tell. In fact, you tell them every single night to your girlfriends on the telephone. Am I right about that? All right, I'm sorry. Maybe to your guy friends on the telephone. But I mean, sometimes, I know I shouldn't say this. It's terrible. But sometimes it's even gossip, right? You know, it's like, you will not believe the color hair that Martha now has. I just saw her in the supermarket, and it does not become her, okay? I mean, I know that on Monday I'm going to be telling stories. I don't care about the football game, frankly, because nobody I care about is in the football game. But I do deeply care about the commercials. And I'm sure that I'm going to be talking about the commercials on Monday. That is what Super Bowl is about. who you're with, right? Who you're hanging with, and unless the bears are in it, sort of who cares, right? Okay? We'll watch it anyway. I mean, the bears may have had a choice. Eagles, no way. Okay, at any rate, we are the ones who can do singing songs, right? You ready, guys, with me? Ba, 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 ba. Miranda, I'm not hearing you. Ba, 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 ba. One more. Ba, 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 right. All right, that is phonics. Got the phonics? Ba, 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 ba. Okay. You can have a lot of fun with this stuff. You can invent songs. Those kids don't know the difference. It could be Queen Latifah for all they care, right? Have some fun with this stuff, all right? I mean, I used to sit around and go to my kids, I'm Beyonce. Yeah, right. Okay, so dramatic play, as we showed you before. Engaging in conversations. It doesn't matter what the conversations are about. Let the kids talk about slugs. I hated slugs, but my middle son loves slugs. So guess what? We talked about slugs. All right, turns out that playful learning really works. There's a study that just came out. I really like it. It's by Hahn, Volkovich, and Buell. I don't really want you to memorize these little graphs. They're a little too fancy. What I do want to tell you is that what we do is we read the story, and in one condition we read the story and then we played afterwards. And in the other condition we just read the story and talked about the words afterwards. And where do you think the highest bars are? Is it in the blue or the red? Can you tell? Think of blue as play and red as not play. Who wins? Got it? Playing works. All right, playing works. In math, same idea. Ready, guys? I spy with my little eyes a rectangle. Any of you find a rectangle around here? Okay. Got it. I mean, by the way, there are a bazillion of them. Keep looking. Okay. Those patterns matter. Any of you ever play Candyland? And play Candyland? And then you play Candyland? You know? And then you play Candyland? Then you almost feel gratitude when they ask for chutes and ladders. Okay. But when that happens, they're learning how to count. They're learning extent. Isn't it a shame that my friends Romani and Sigler had to do a study to show that they were learning extent and number? Didn't you know this? Okay. Now, spatial skills are another area. I happen to work in an area where we're looking at spatial extent. You know, we don't think of it so often as something that's important, but spatial skills, like playing with blocks, are really important to human intelligence as well. Like some of us can find our way places. I am not one of them. I rely solely on my GPS. They're important to math outcomes. They're important in getting us situated for engineers. So you've heard about STEM. Any of you heard of STEM? It's like a big word these days. Science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, guess what? A lot of people are teaching engineering through Legos by learning how to do spatial learning. All right, so let me just take blocks. One day I get a call, City of New York. They're in panic. Come up here right away. Why? They are taking the blocks out of the classroom. I said, no, that's too ridiculous. Nobody would take blocks out of the classroom. Oh, yes, it's starting to happen. So I said, okay, we'll have a research study just like we did with chutes and ladders, and we will show you that blocks are important. So we asked whether parents talk more about spatial terms when they're playing with blocks, because we know that understanding things like middle, end, around, through, in, up, down, over, under, got it? Knowing that vocabulary actually relates to later mathematics ability. Do we think more about space in certain conditions over others? So we decided to take 3- and 5-year-old kids. We had 3 conditions. One was a free play condition. Mega Blocks gave us the blocks, and we said, just go and play with any of the blocks you want to play with. Number 2, we had a guided play condition. And in that, we sort of had an IKEA furniture sort of situation where we gave them these laminated instructions and said, could you build a heliport? Could you build a garage with your parent? And then in the other condition, we gave them the heliport. We gave them the garage. We just wanted to see what would happen in the pre-assembled condition. Here you can see the conditions. Over here, it's pre-assembled. Just play with it. By the way, a lot of toys that you buy these days are like that. You don't get to put them together. Over here is the free play. The blocks come out of the bag. Do anything that you want. See our little IKEA stuff down here? Okay? All right. So the question is, what was going to prompt the most spatial language, and did any of these conditions, the free play, the guided play, whatever, work better over time? Now, we only had those 3 conditions at the beginning. Time 1, we had a free play group, we had a pre-assembled group, we had a guided play group. Time 2, everyone went into guided play. Now, are you ready for the results? All right. what you want to look at, remember everybody was in two conditions, a first condition and a second condition, and here they are. First condition, pre-assembled play, guided play. What do you see? Guided. Free play, guided play. Everybody, what wins? Over here, guided, guided, no difference. See it? So it turns out the context does make a difference. Turns out in guided play, 10% of the words you use, even though you don't know it, turn out to be rich spatial language words. Second, turns out that in non-block play, it turns out they only use it 3% of the time. Blocks are important for young kids' spatial learning. Duh. Let's go to geometry. Geometry, you say? Sorry, now you're way above us. Nah, it just means shape learning. But remember, parents don't make the connection between shapes and geometry. So what can you say now? Oh, by the way, we're doing geometry today. Okay? Now in our geometry lesson, we have a hint from guided play as to what's going to work. And notice we've all seen things like geometry here, right? We just happen to call it a shape sorter. All right. Now, the question is, what's a real triangle? What is a real triangle here? Wow, it's a little bit of a tricky question. Because what you've always seen as a real triangle is right here. See it? That's your triangle. Why? Because it has a... Got it? The point on the top. Apex. You guys are fancy. Okay. And here is another triangle. Got it? Is that a triangle? Yes. Wrong. Okay, you're actually right. But to a kid, from a kid's eye view, that is not a triangle. Do you know why? It doesn't have a point on the top. Can you see the problem? So they can't distinguish so well between this and this and this and this weird looking triangle because they're all not really good triangles. You all with me on that? Now, the reason you knew what was triangle is because you know the answer based on 3 sides, 3 angles. You know what we call the criterial feature of triangles. But if kids are only shown the one kind of triangle, they're never going to learn it. So what we did is we asked how do they shift from a similarity to a rule-based system and what kinds of experience helps them get there. Of course, we were looking at guided play again, and we had 3 conditions. You knew we were going to do this, right? A guided play condition, a direct instruction condition, an exploratory free play condition. Now, let me tell you what they were, and then let me tell you and introduce you to Lulu the puppet. What we're going to do in the guided play condition is we're going to say, wow, look at this. What do you see? And she goes, oh, that looks like it has point there, point there, point. Whoa, and it has sides over here. Wow, look at that. Does this have the same thing? Eventually the kid goes, oh, yeah, that has 3 sides. Oh, yeah? Oh, what about this one? And we show them all sorts of weird atypical triangles. You with me on that? All right. What do you see? What do you see? Who's the one who's giving us the answers? The kid, the discoverer. Now we're going to go to the empty vessel metaphor and direct instruction. This, you got it. This is a triangle. A triangle has 3 sides and 3 angles. This is also a triangle. It has 3 sides and 3 angles. Now, who's doing the teaching there? Is the kid discovering anything? No. And in free play, we just give them a lot of triangles and see what happens. All right, now we come to Lulu. Lulu is going to be given all those triangles, typical triangles, atypical triangles, and non-triangles. And all you're supposed to do, they're all smushed up in a pile. Okay? Can you please feed Lulu? She only likes real triangles. And then we asked, which kids do better in the task? Want to guess? Come on, guys, it's your $1 million question. All right, are you sure? Is that your final answer? All right, and the answer is, here are the adults on the left. Guided play, boom. They look pretty much like the adults, right? And these kids are only 5, okay? A little bit less good and atypical, but still much better than what you're seeing in free play and direct instruction. There's another lesson here. Did the free play kids get it? When they were just roaming it? A little bit, and they do a lot worse on hexagons, okay? The point is, if we don't point them toward the right stuff, if our environment doesn't let them explore the things that are going to help them discover, they're not going to learn it. All right, one last study, creativity, when we're doing the same thing. Creativity, we gave 3 different objects to these kids. One was a little square piece of felt. You just cut it out. Just buy it at the art store, okay? Or a little piece of fabric. Second was a crumpled piece of aluminum foil. Third thing we gave was we gave them a pipe cleaner. And we said to the kids, in direct instruction, here is how you can use the pipe cleaner. Here is how you can use the aluminum foil. Are you getting a pattern here? I just want to make sure the pattern is becoming clear, okay? And in the guided play, what do we say? Here's some stuff. How would you use it? What do you think you can do with this? What do you think we can do with this? Oh, got any other ideas? Notice, by the way, I was in there asking for more ideas. Got it? All right. Third, I just plop it in front of the kid and say, hey, here's some stuff. Notice the difference? I'm not pointing them and I'm not challenging them to do more. Now I give them a task. I have a little river, and it's running through a little ground. And on the one side of the ground, I have this bear. And the bear wants to go visit the giraffe. How can he get there? Turns out, the kids, in which condition, had more solutions to the problem. And in the direct instruction, they just used the materials in exactly the way they were taught. All right, in some playful learning, where children initiate, but the adult assists, build strong skills in social and in academic development. Last point, implications. We can have a rich curricular content. You can be teaching sociology, physics, biology, right there in your own child care setting. And you can do it in a playful pedagogy. So when people tell you, but there's a core, and we must teach mathematics, it doesn't mean you have to bludgeon people, okay? You can still teach in a way that best respects how people learn. So there's a huge gap right now in what we know in the science and what we are doing. I'd like to propose that it's time to narrow that gap or even close that gap. The science here offers virtual consensus. We all agree. We know how kids learn. They learn when they're active, when they're engaged, and when something is meaningful. And in Einstein Never Used Flashcards, our job was simply to put that down, to help people understand that you were going to get a rich education, but you'd get that rich education only if you did it in a playful way. We brought a group of scientists together, and in 2009 we published Play Equals Learning. And the group that got together was telling us all the different ways that they did playful learning and what they studied in their research. The people who were there, everybody from board games to studying puzzles and blocks. We then published Celebrate the Scribble. The scribble. Because parents no longer make the connection between scribbles and learning. Today, it's like the dumbest things we have to do, right? You make a tree that looks like a tree and you cut out silly preformed apples. And all the kids are pasting the apples on the tree and we call that art? That is not art. Art is what comes from the child. When that child holds the pencil, they're learning motor skills. When that child draws a circle, they have intent. When that child draws a family, even if it doesn't look like you, they're doing symbolic understanding and storytelling. In 2009, we published a mandate for playful learning in preschool, to put all the information in one place, the research for you, and to put it in accessible terms so that policymakers could also get into the game. And then, recognizing that not everybody gets what they learn from a book, we took it into the streets. We took it into the streets in Central Park, New York, and we had 30 activities that were all born from the science of learning. Every single one of them had a scientific paper that was at its base. And there you go, a lot of people, 70,000 people, showed up to participate in the spatial activities of Lego building. Notice they're all green? Because they're all green, you can't do it by color. You have to do it by spatial orientation. Notice over here, this playground, the kids put that together. They were the designers of Imagination Playground, which is brought to you by Kaboom. You have Kaboom in Chicago as well. Over here at Crayola, recognizing the narrative in the young child's art. It can happen. It's the science of learning in action. In June 2011, the Ultimate Block Party went to Toronto. October 2011, we created a block party in Baltimore. And the Secretary of Education of the United States, Arne Duncan, was there with his kids for 2 hours in the cold, rain, and damp. And Chicago, I think it's your turn. Yeah? What do you think? What do you think? All right. So a group met yesterday to try to pull one together for Chicago. All right, the point. Playful learning can help children develop the 21st century skills. You know what they are now? Want to say them with me? Collaboration, communication, content, critical thinking, creative innovation, and confidence. Our job, the job of the people in this room, is to get the mission going. We're the ones who are the ambassadors. It isn't going to happen if we don't do it with the greatest natural resource that we have in this country. You know, a child today has to learn more than just the facts. They have to put those facts into a creative framework that's going to solve the problems of tomorrow. And I would argue that in 2040, what we are going to need to have are thinkers, because those thinkers are the only people who are going to get jobs. The rest of those straight-A students are going to be outsourced to India. I believe that the 6 C's can be the next report card, and that while the kids doing the next report card, believe it or not, they'll also be happy and well-adjusted human beings. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Natalie Bortoli, Vice President of Education and Community Connections at Chicago Children's Museum, and I am thrilled to be here today on behalf of the museum, partnering with Illinois Action for Children and the University of Illinois Institute for Government Affairs on this exciting event. Kathy, thank you so much for your comments this morning. I know you always are so inspiring. You get our juices flowing, and another round of applause. So there's really no place I'd rather be right now than in this room with Kathy and with all of you who are dedicated educators who are really committed to doing what is absolutely best for young children. I know that we're all united in our efforts to make sure that all children receive a high-quality early education that gives them the skills needed to be successful and fulfilled human beings who are ready for the future. To further the conversation that Kathy has started with us this morning, we've also assembled a panel of professionals from various areas within the landscape of early childhood education. And now I'd like to introduce our panel members. So if the three of you might join me up here at the table. That's what I was thinking. Great. So to introduce our panel, it's my great pleasure. First to introduce Kathy Main. Kathy is the clinical instructor and program coordinator of the Early Childhood Education Program at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Monique Draper is the director of provider programs at Illinois Action for Children. And Beth Wilson is the manager of early learning initiatives and child development specialist at Chicago Children's Museum. So welcome to all three of you, and thank you sincerely for joining us today. Kathy, I'd like to invite you to get us started by sharing your comments. Okay, great.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting me to be here, and it's such an honor to be part of this panel and to follow up this discussion that Kathy just had. When she sat down next to me, I just said I'm in awe, and I'm completely inspired by this. And I had notes that I thought about, and then I'm frantically scribbling more things. But I think I have to speak sort of from the perspective of somebody who is preparing teachers to go work with young children and families out in the field. And a couple of things just come to mind that I'm going to point out that I want you to really think about in following up on Kathy's talk. One thing that I think a lot about when we see this discussion about playful learning and play is learning, I throw my little caution out there, which I think Kathy did a great job in mentioning in her talk, that play isn't just an instructional tool. Play in and of itself needs to be valued for just what it is. It's not a means to an end. It is an end, and it is something that we have to very carefully value and make sure that kids are playing for the sake of play as what we know we value in play. Kathy also talked about something that I talk with my students about too, this concept of free play versus guided play. And I think this is a critical concept to be thinking about. The idea of free play, where she said, I want all of you to think about this, where children are bosses. that is where they do learn to regulate. That is where they learn to understand their world in relationship to others. It is a very, very important piece, and make sure that that is so part of your curriculum all the time. And the guided play, she mentioned something that's near and dear to me that I want you to also think about. Learning always takes place in the context of a trusting and safe relationship. It is that relationship that you have with the child that guides them in their play. And so I encourage you to really think about that piece. And then the second piece she so eloquently discussed too is the language that you use. We have to think about our language in a very specific and concrete way. And when we plan for children and we need to plan our language too sometimes. We need to think about what are the questions we might pose when we put these materials out. What are the kinds of things kids might be thinking? And we need to really think specifically about that. It's not just about putting materials out and hoping kids will come up with the ideas. It's about us really thinking about what we will say and what we will do. So I put those couple thoughts out there you to think about. And I'd be remiss if I also didn't throw this one other piece out there with regard to free play. I couldn't help but when I walked around and looked at what people had put up there about their memories of play, when they see children playing, so much of it is about the physical play and the outdoor play and the creative play. And we need to be really thinking about how that is done and how that is part of our curriculum, and not to let that get lost as we move up in the grades and as we move on. And not having those outdoor rough and tumble play spaces where kids learn about how they interact with one another and how their body is actually in space, and those very, very critical parts of their development. I wrote something last night that when I was thinking about this, that I also thought I would share with you really briefly too. I was at a conference where we were helping principals think about how early childhood fits into the broader school. And one of the principals said, well, how do we know when we walk into the classroom if the play is productive? And we immediately, jumped right on, and we said, well, just as some of the things Kathy was saying, well, of course the play is productive. When they're rolling the die, they're counting the die. And we jumped right to the correlates of, again, what I was saying before, that play is a means to something, versus just saying to this gentleman who is trying so hard to understand and value this, just saying, all play is productive. All play is meaningful, okay? And I feel like we need to, and I'll close up because I want to make sure, we need to be advocates for this kind of thing, and we need to stand up for it, and we need to be able to say, not shy away from the principle and jump right on about counting dice and literacy and narrative. We need to say this in and of itself is what is of value. And the only way we're going to be able to do it is if we work hard and we understand it. We read the studies, we pay attention, and we know what it means, and we're able to articulate it, and we're able to stand up for children in that way. And I just want to give a shout out to this book. The fact that it's mandate, it is a mandate. It is our job, and it is our role to do this and to do right by kids. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Monique, I'd like to invite you to share your comments.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you very much, Kathy, for validating things that I've long tried to get across to people working in the field. That learning happens not just sitting at a desk, not just in the classroom proper. And when parents or teachers would say to me, they're just playing, yes, it makes you cringe, but when you are able to show them and point out to them, what the things that they're actually learning, it makes you feel, great to have that illustration. One thing that Kathy said was high quality child care has a playful learning environment. Much of the work that I do and oversee deals with the quality rating system here in Illinois. and the team that I have, deployed to the field, we are out there helping teachers and caregivers create those high-quality environments, showing providers and caregivers what that means, how to make the environment enriching and where children want to explore, where they feel confident and safe to go out and try things, where they know that there is not a right and a wrong, where they can discover for themselves what works, what doesn't work. All of those entities, we want people to understand and figure out how to do that. So my team is available to help guide you through that, because oftentimes people, caregivers get so caught up in the things, the materials. And it's not just about the materials, it's how we use the materials, how we guide children to discovering other uses for the materials. That brings me to a story. For the last 3 weeks, I think it is, at our agency, we have been doing some overtime. And so one of the supports that we offered for overtime was some of the staff needed childcare. And so they came to my team and they asked if we could provide childcare, and we did. And we set up play in our conference room, which is not really what it's designed to do, right? So we had some puzzles, we had some books, we had some Play-Doh, we did some arts and crafts. We just put it out in different sections in the conference room, and we let the children choose what they wanted to do. We had some story time, so we had an area of, quiet area. And there was this one little boy, he was about 4 years old, and there were puzzles on the table. And he sat there for about 20 to 30 minutes, and he put together and took apart each one of those puzzles. And I was sitting there with him, and I was asking questions. He was talking to me. He couldn't quite figure out, because they were about 9 to 10 piece puzzles, which was a little bit advanced for him. But he figured it out, because I didn't step in to tell him how to do it. He worked it out until he figured it out, just by, some gentle questions that I would ask, or I would say, well, what if you think if we tried this? And he, well, oh, okay, that might work. And then he asked me a question, and I turn it back on him. And so he sat there, and I let him sit for as long as he wanted to sit until he decided that he wanted to do something else. So there was a lot of learning taking place in just those few little minutes. And that can happen in your child care setting. And if you need assistance, or if you're not certain how to do that, we are more than happy to help and come out and help guide you, in how to make that happen. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Monique. And finally, Beth, I'd like to invite you to share your comments.
Thanks, Natalie, and thank you, Kathy, for your wonderful presentation and for coming to the museum while you were here and seeing the work. We're really excited about circus, and I just want to take this opportunity to talk with you all and share with you some of the process of how we develop exhibits and programs and experiences within our museum, some of the things that we think about. And first and foremost on our minds is always applying the science of early learning and thinking about play and child development to guide in our decision making as we're creating exhibits and programs for children. Because we are a museum setting, we rely a lot on the environment as a teacher and as a way to facilitate learning and play. We also think a lot about how the environment can help build a sense of community. And so therefore we think about the people within the environment making the learning come to life, building relationships, and very importantly, coming together and collaborating around children's experience and play. So always, as I mentioned, we're thinking about developmentally appropriate practice, and Kathy mentioned this in her presentation. I don't think it can be understated, because understanding how children develop, how children learn, how children play is really at the core of creating experiences that are going to be meaningful for children. I think that all of us as professionals need to share that knowledge that we hold with families and with other professionals to talk about the ways that children learn, not just what children need to learn, but how children learn, how children play, and create opportunities for them to really dig in and get into a deep state of play where they're using their skills and abilities and they're cultivating those things through what they do naturally, through how they play, how they learn. Because I think too many times we're thinking about what we want children to learn rather than what their skills are, what they're working on, where they're coming from, and how they make connections and build meaning within their life. And I think that gives us an interesting lens to consider our role as well. As researchers, as folks who have a deep understanding and a value for play and children's development, and so using our knowledge to select the right materials that are open-ended and flexible, and invite children to place, again, their background knowledge, bring it into the forefront, and put it onto these materials to make sense of their world, to make sense of new information, to make meaning, of course, with our help. Also thinking about environments as a huge part of this as well. Again, the design, the way that we put out materials. You can't just kind of put materials out into a space and say, okay, play with them, have fun. But thinking about how we pair materials, thinking about how we set the stage for meaningful play to happen is also really critical. And I think championing the fact that learning is integrated. So not, trying to avoid pulling out what the content is, but saying when children are engaged in play, when they're in circus, there's a wide variety of skills and abilities that they're working on. There's so much content. There's so much emotional and social regulation and learning that's happening. So I think the more that we can look at the whole child and articulate within the experiences we're providing, within the environments that we're providing, how the whole child is being nurtured, how the whole child is developing is really, really important. I think when we strive to build community as well, a huge piece of this, again, is bringing people together around play and around child development and what is good for kids. So another big piece of what we're trying to do at the museum is communicate to parents when they're there that they've made a great choice to come to the museum because their children are indeed learning. And then we try to call out how children are learning. And we do this through quotes, signs, having environments that are so engaging that parents are interested in watching how their children are playing. They can connect. We often talk about the nostalgia factor. They can connect with their own childhood and the ways that they played so that they can see the value, reconnect with why that was important in their life. And through this, I think we broaden the reach of sharing and communicating the importance of play. I think when Kathy is talking about the 6 C's, something that really resonates with me as I'm in our museum and walking in and out of exhibits and watching families interact is that the 6 C's are really happening in our space. Children are communicating their ideas and expressing themselves as they play, absolutely. In every exhibit, at any time of day, I can see that. Children are collaborating. They're collaborating to build stories and narratives. They're collaborating to work toward a common goal. They're critically thinking about what they're doing, what they want to do next, how they want to use our space, how they want to use the materials to create something new, to innovate a new way to play, a new story, a new design idea. They're also, and this is to me perhaps what's most exciting about learning environments that are set up for children to play and to discover on their own, is that they're safe places for children to take risks, to not be afraid to fail, because within the safety of play, There is no wrong way. There is no wrong way to play. And when adults are there as providing guidance, they're not looking for a right or wrong answer. They're just looking for expanding the child's thinking process, for helping the child bring together what they know and make meaning from it. And because the museum provides this safety and asks children to take these risks in the safe zone of play, I just delight when I walk around and I see children's faces lighting up with joy as they are learning, discovering themselves as competent, building confidence, developing their skills, and just feeling so good. And I think that nothing can take them on the lifelong journey of learning and of being an inquisitive person, being a thoughtful person, than feeling confident and feeling the joy that learning from play can bring. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And again, thanks to all three of you for being here with us this morning and sharing your insightful comments. It's great to hear from each of you.